today I've got James Millis with me. He's a partner in our property litigation team, and he's going to talk about some latest government reforms.
So, announced only on the 17th of May was the government's big planned changes to residential tenancies. This is the biggest change in residential lettings if it comes into implementation in over 30 years. It's important to add that this is just a bill at this stage, and it's the first reading before Parliament, but it sets out what the government has said for some time, that it plans to do away with no-fault evictions. But it's not just that which is included in the bill. The first point, which is flagged up in the very first sections of the bill, is that they are basically going to ban and get rid of all assured short-hold tenancies. And by getting rid of that level, will turn all tenancies into what are called assured tenancies, which have generally greater protection. The other big change is that currently you can have tenancies or assured short-hold tenancies normally of a standard minimum term of around 6 months or 12 months. Sometimes people agree 24, 36 months up to 7 years. Fixed-term tenancies have been around for quite some time. What the government is suggesting is that they will change that so that there will only be a periodic tenancy, so no fixed terms at all, and those periodic tenancies can be no longer than a 1 month period. There's also some other changes. There will be some new provisions and grounds for landlords to recover possession, and because the no fault eviction would be going away, the government's recognised that landlords might need to recover a property if, for example, they want to sell the property, or if they want to move a close family member to live in their property, then they're going to introduce grounds which will allow that. And also there's suggestion there'll be some new grounds introduced if tenants breach their obligations or persistently don't pay their rent on time. There are already grounds for that, but the suggestion is that these will be toughened up in some way. They're also planning to change the notice periods that tenants have to give. So currently it's quite common to see tenants giving only 1 month's notice to a landlord that they wish to leave the property, and what this bill suggests is that that will be increased to 2 months. A big point which has arisen is this concept of rent increases. So it's been sort of a practice for some time, for example, that tenancies will be for 6 months or 12 months, and then at that end of that period the landlord will want to put the rent up. So by these changes, it effectively reverts to what was currently in place for assured tenancies, that you can only increase the rent once a year, and there is statutory provision under section 13 for that rent to be reviewed independently as to whether or not that's a reasonable amount to increase. So it would stop this bad habit, shall we say, of landlords every 6 months hitting their tenant with a "you must pay more rent." One of the other things which has got a bit of publicity is about having pets. So it's often the case that landlords will say no pets allowed in the property. What the government is proposing is that the tenant will have a legal right to have a pet in their home, which the landlord must consider and can't sort of unreasonably refuse. And balance against that, there's a suggestion that the landlord would be able to require the tenant to take out a special insurance to cover the pet being in there or sort of damage by it. There's also going to be a ban, which has been debated in the past, about landlords not being able to exclude people who are on benefits from renting a property. There's also plans for a new ombudsman to be introduced, which would be compulsory. There isn't anything currently in the private residential sector for that. There's a few voluntary schemes when good landlords join associations and do that, but the idea is there will be a new process and an ombudsman that can try and resolve landlord and tenant disputes. There's also intended to be a new database or property register that will require landlords to sign up to it and give their details and indicate the properties. And alongside that, the intention from the government is to try and strengthen some of the local authorities' enforcement powers and introduce fines for non-compliance, that sort of thing.
So James, that's lots of information there. Do you have any observations yourself?
Well, I think we've already started to see landlords selling up and exiting, and also some landlords have been hesitant in letting properties whilst there's been this uncertainty. So, which all adds, unfortunately, to the pressure on the lettings market, because if you've got less properties becoming available, it just adds to the problem. From our experience of dealing with clients, there are some immediate, obvious problems, particularly for landlords who perhaps are businesses, who perhaps have stock or properties which they might use for staff, and this could affect private businesses, could affect farming clients, it could affect schools, colleges, NHS trusts, all those kind of entities that have a selection of housing stock which they may use at some point for some staff, but at other points would be surplus and it could perhaps be let out to someone else.
Thanks, James, for all of that. We will likely return to this project when the Renters Reform Bill has progressed through Parliament and when we know a bit more about the changes.